Hello, good evening, everybody. Looking forward to this week's live. We'll just wait a few minutes to get everybody set up and our guests to log on. So we'll be with you guys shortly. All right, good evening for those who are starting to join us. It is Thursday, June 4th of 2020, and we are already halfway through the year. And we are going to discuss a couple of things today. This week's topic is going to be the do's and don'ts of international students. So go ahead and send us your questions. We are going to discuss these issues and we're going to see what you can do with your student visas and what you shouldn't do with your student visas. So for this week, we do have some quick announcements. First is the USCIS Open today. This is great news because of the fact that many people who have had canceled citizenship ceremonies are now going to be rescheduled. The courts are set to open at the end of June for non-detained immigration courts, and we are going to continue to see the progress as the state starts to open back up. Downtown Orlando has been very lively with the protesters out demanding equal rights. We've been enjoying watching the First Amendment being utilized. So we are with anybody who is about equal rights. And we have a special guest today, and that's Attorney Joel Caminero, and asking you guys to send us your questions to see if he can help you answer them about what you can and can't do on a student visa, what your options are after you study, and going from there. Let me see where he is, and we will get started. All right. So that's what we mentioned today on today's live, and we're going to talk about the do's and don'ts on the student visas. He is still missing. Okay. So for many of you who don't know that there are an array of student visas available out there. Some are what's called an F1, another type of student visa, or in the realm of a student visa is an M1. And then there's also the J1. And we are going to go ahead and tell you, what are some things you should do and you shouldn't do. And we're going to have Joel just join me because he had some technical difficulties. You want to grab that chair? So bear with us here. All right.
Hey, how's everyone going?
So this is Attorney Joel Caminero. He joined our office a few months ago. He was practicing in the DC area. So I would like everybody, I know he's presented several times with me, but we've not really gotten to know him. And he's actually served in the Navy. And we thank him for his service and his dedication to our clients. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand it off to him to talk about his student visas. And, we'll go from there.
Okay. Yeah, so we're getting a lot of questions regarding F1 visas. As it relates to working, a lot of people want to know, can I work here on an F1? And unfortunately, unless you're on CPT, OPT, or STEM OPT, you are not eligible to work. Now, because of COVID-19, there is what's called an economic hardship exemption. But for that, you have to qualify. Technically, you need 1 full year of academic completion, and all that is processed through your school. The school has to give you permission and do some forms and investigative, research for you on your behalf. But that's the primary, question that we're seeing a lot. Also, a lot of questions are coming up about ride sharing. Can I work as a ride share driver or delivery person? No, you cannot. That's a violation of your status as well. So just don't get caught up in those kind of issues.
So one of the common questions, as Joel mentioned, is can I work on an F1 student visa? And the F1 visa comes with a lot of restrictions. For example, if a student is to miss, a couple of classes, then they can fall out of status immediately. So what Joel is going to go through today is some tips and some questions that we see pretty often with the student visas and what problems that we have in the past when this happens. And I guess, Joel, what are some of the most common issues we see with people driving?
For example, you might get into an accident and you might not have a driver's license, or you might be in the middle of completing a ride. And the police come, they ask you for your documentation. Some people don't have licenses. They can get ticketed or arrested in some cases, and that could lead to someone possibly being detained in this environment. So just to play it safe, you should definitely avoid violating your status at all costs. We also get questions about doing certain other types of things that people normally wouldn't consider working, such as volunteering. It just depends on the type of degree that you're studying for. For example, you can't volunteer to be a model per se. Again, this is just an example, if you're studying a theology program, you want to volunteer at a local religious institution, that's likely permissible. If you're displacing an individual from by volunteering in a position that normally would be paid, then you're likely going to be violating your status as well. Someone asked about investing in stocks, for example. That's something that's really technical, but generally speaking, that's considered passive income. So you are in general situations allowed to invest in stocks. Those are just some of the questions that people ask us. But if the rule of thumb is, if you're placing yourself in a situation where you're in the gray area, for example, if you're working for remotely for a company overseas, will you be a violation of your status? If you're getting paid in a different foreign currency, is that a violation of your status? If you have to ask yourself those questions, it's probably a violation of your status. So definitely consult with an attorney before you place yourself in a position that's going to jeopardize your status and future visas and entries into the United States. Do you have anything else as far as employment?
So this is something we do get asked a lot about, and I just want to reiterate what Joel is saying for those who might have missed it. So on a student visa, we get asked all the time, can I create a company? Can I model? Can I volunteer and receive payment? And a lot of times we use a standard of whether or not it's equal to an actual job. Is this displacing work? And moreover, is it affecting your study or in your area of study? So Joel mentioned, unless modeling is in your realm of study or your realm of work or the purpose of your visa, then no, volunteering there as a hobby or working there as a hobby is not going to be justifiable. But if you want to volunteer at the World Food Bank and you're passing out food for the day, of course, that is something that is acceptable. So we do understand the dilemma of international students who struggling financially and want to make ends meet. As Joel mentioned, you can work if you've been authorized by the university and the USCIS. And then that work is typically on campus and in your field. And there are very limited exceptions when it can be off of campus and outside of your field. So I will then ask Joel to explain a very rare situation where off-campus work would be permissible.
I guess we have a few student clients that are studying, and they might have, for example, STEM OPT or a very technical job that's related to their field of study or their post-completion at this point, and they're working in the STEM field, which is science, technology, engineering, math, biomedical engineers, for example, medical laboratory workers. Especially with COVID-19, there's a lot of work out there and a lot of employers willing to sponsor, students in those fields. But those are just some general exemptions to that, working off campus.
And so you have to show those things to meet those exceptions, and you have to get authorization as a student. With the student visa, you can study for a very long time if you're maintaining your status and you're in compliance with the requirements. So it would really be a shame to violate your status off of some stupid technicality for selling too much stuff on eBay, right? Because then what if the US government considers you working and not studying, and then now you won't be able to pursue the work visa or an H-1B, which is really common as far as what to do after you finished your studying. So I'm gonna actually go ahead and go to the next step of what happens. Okay, you've been studying for 4 years, your whatever your course time is, and now you've completing your study. What options after the F1 does everybody have, or most people might have, Joel, when they've completed their course of study?
All right, so a very common transition from an F visa would be an H-1B, for example. There are other types of visas, but the main point, I guess, to remember is you have to stay in status for a lot of these transitionals or changing your status. And violating the terms of your current visa by working will definitely prejudice any chances you might have in the future of obtaining a different visa. I know NIAF does quite a few change of statuses. Like EB2 is pretty popular now.
Yeah, so
investment visas.
It's true. So like you want to start thinking about your plans, in your last year or sometimes even more, about how to find a way to remain in the US. Maybe you have an employer willing to do an H-1B. H-1B is great. It can give you 3 years to live and work here, but the problem is you can be subject to what's called the visa lottery. And if your case is not selected, then you're just out of luck, really. But this can be on OPT. So for a lot of students, if they time it right, they can have 2 chances at the H-1B lottery, or if they continue their course of study and then always master's degrees, for example, you might have a better chance at getting selected for the CAP. Now, let's say you don't have a job or you don't have a job offer. What other options do you have? For those individuals who do ask us, can I create my own company on a student visa? The answer is yes, but you absolutely cannot work in that company. It must be as passive as possible. You should have employees to demonstrate that this company is operating without you. Now, if you've invested money in this company and you are a citizen of a treaty country, for example, Spain, Italy, Egypt, Jordan, they have signed treaties with the United States for what's called an E2 investor visa. So you might be able to actually petition for yourself if you've invested in a company or you're even your own startup while you're studying. You may be able to convert your F1 status to a change of status to an E2, for example. Then there's all sorts. There's something called an EB2, NIW, National Interest Waiver. We have all these great options on our website. I know Joel and I are working together on a couple of very interesting advanced degree individuals. And this is a great option because if you don't have money for a company and you don't have a job offer, but you are an exceptional person that's going to benefit our country, that's going to benefit the United States, you can essentially try to what's called self-petition yourself under the NIW if you can demonstrate that your endeavor is going to benefit the United States and you have the capability of launching and maintaining your endeavor. So there's a lot of interesting options out there to see how you could remain in the US even outside your F1 status, So I want to take a step back with F1s and talk about traveling. This is really important. So when you travel on your F1, you need to make sure that your I-20 and your visa is valid. If your visa has expired, but your I-20 is still valid, you cannot travel in and out the United States without going through the consulate and getting a new visa, but you can remain in the US. Joel, what other issues are we seeing with our students right now, given the whole COVID issues?
Yeah, so that's something you definitely want to monitor. A lot of countries are being, the US is restricting a lot of countries from foreign nationals from different countries from re-entering after they, for example, visited. I'll give you an example. The recent one starting May 28th was Brazil. If you visited or traveled through Brazil in the past 14 days, you have to essentially self-quarantine yourself outside of Brazil for 14 days prior to entering here. So you would have to go to another country that's not restricted for entry by the U.S. I think we had someone recently travel, and they, it was just a lengthy process. It's costly. They had to travel to a third country before coming to the U.S.
Yeah.
I just want to speak a little bit more about those countries.
So you want to be careful. So there's a lot going on. We're living in dynamic times, right? So there can be bans, immigration bans that you might be subject to. There can be COVID, CDC, Department of State bans because they're trying to control the COVID outbreak. So before you travel, please make sure you speak to your attorney or your advisors and make sure travel is critical. If your country doesn't have a ban today, you could very well be visiting, and while you're there, the ban comes up. So that would be a terrible thing to happen, and that could affect your studies and delay your ability to return. The client, Joel mentioned, he left Europe to a country in Asia and quarantined there for 14 days just so he could come back to the United States because they weren't allowing people from this European country to enter the US. So please be careful, be mindful. You cannot just travel because you have a valid I-20 and an F1 visa. There's all sorts of, what I call minefield of different things that might pop up, and you will then have a problem returning to the United States. And then we also just want to remind you guys that we post these videos every week. We also do a monthly newsletter. So if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, I know I would very much appreciate it, or share our pages and then give us topics. If you don't want to know about F1, but you want to know about deportation defense, let me know and we'll make sure that we're going to go ahead and discuss it. We also, in this time, I wanted to touch on another issue just to make sure that everybody is being as safe as possible. And Joel, why don't you, tell us a little bit about concerns with protests and foreigners who are not citizens of the U.S.
Right. So we've been hearing a lot about different issues on people, and I say non-citizens because the same rules apply to even lawful permanent residents that have green cards. Certain violations of laws could definitely impact you. For example, there's a lot of protests going on right now, and people have asked us, can I go participate? There's no telling what's going to happen at the protest. If you're generally just peacefully there, that's fine. But the problem with that is you may get caught up in a group. The police might choose to detain or arrest everyone in a group, and a foreign national might be caught up in that, and then that could definitely impact your status here, especially if you end up in jail. It's very important that if you are arrested for whatever reason, that you specifically speak to an immigration attorney. And I say specifically an immigration attorney because although many of us do not practice criminal defense, a lot of us do know the immigration consequences of criminal convictions. Even taking a plea bargain, for example, in Florida, you can get what's called an adjudication withheld, which is perfect if you are a citizen of the U.S. Unfortunately, if you are a non-citizen, including lawful permanent residents, an adjudication withheld is a conviction for immigration purposes that could lead either to your removal by deportation through this country, or you being denied admission into the country upon entry. So you definitely need to be very mindful of the laws of every state. Every state is different.
Right, and I would agree with Attorney Joel. Protest is great. Just causes are happening. We are about equality and freedom, and we stand behind all these peaceful protesters. However, it would be naive of us to ignore that sometimes situations can escalate beyond our control, and you don't want to jeopardize your status. And sometimes your university might even have its own set of rules that even if you're arrested and then dismissed, you might still have to go through some type of code of conduct rehabilitation. So as an international student, you're subject to a lot of rules and regulations, not just the US government laws, but also your university requirements. So, if you want to participate in our, civic engagement, we just want you to be as mindful as possible. Nobody has an intention of being arrested at a peaceful protest, but if things got out of hand quickly, you don't want to affect your status.
Right.
Do we have any other questions that we want to address? Do you guys have any questions for us about the F1 status? I see a comment here.
I don't know if we touched
Oh, my
base
friend
on-
Farana says, I think that's clap. Hey, Farana. And then here it says something in Arabic. لو سمحت تكلم بالعربي. إن شاء الله كل ثالث خميس بنعمل فيسبوك لايف بالعربي، بس هلا اليوم راح نحكي بالانجليزي. اذا عندكم اي سؤال بالعربي ابعتوا لي رساله وان شاء الله بجاوبكم كمان اسبوعين. So see you in 2 weeks, Facebook Live for Arabic. Next week's Facebook Live is going to be meeting another team member, Gloria Lopez. Gloria has been with me for, almost 8 years now. We've been working together. And she is an incredible legal assistant and will, works on so many close cases. So if you are a client, former, current, and you want to get to know Gloria a little bit more, please tune in next week. I just want to see if there's anything else we should address. So Joel mentioned something that's really important: foreign nationals and criminal history. I even saw a post today in a criminal defense attorney group on Facebook saying, please be careful with your international students. Please be careful with your foreign nationals. Sometimes you can't accept a certain plea deal, which might be the best way to get them out of a case, but it might affect their circumstances or affect your ability to become a citizen if there was some type of, CIMT, that's called crime involving moral turpitude, or something that can affect your good moral character, period, which is required for U.S. citizenship. So for those who just tuned in, if you want to rewind it, today we talked about F1 visas, the do's and the don'ts, knowing your rights. Since we are talking about knowing your rights, I do want to talk about, it's a hot topic. Am I allowed to protest? Can police stop me? Can they search my car? Now, I'm not a constitutional, common law professor or a criminal defense attorney, but I can tell you in regards to immigration, an ICE arrest warrant is not enough to search my home. If ICE comes knocking on my door, I have a warrant, you can ask them to slide the warrant under the door. Joel, what should somebody be looking for if they want to allow ICE to search their home? What type of warrant do they need?
Well, typically they need to be accompanied by a local law enforcement agency, whether, we live in Orlando, whether it's OPD or OCSO, Orange County Sheriff's Office. But ICE being at your door does not give them a right to come in. Just ask for the document through, like Nayef said, under the door. If you have questions, you can just always call us. We typically have an answering service as well.
So that's true. We do have a 24-hour answering service. We've had clients who, unfortunately, let's say the spouse has been arrested, they're able to get a hold of us even on a weekend or over a holiday. So, that's our number is here, and it gets to our cell phones straight if there's an emergency. So God forbid this is for emergencies, you want something happen, call us, and we'll see how we can help you. And I'm just going to ask you all one more time to go ahead and follow us on all of our social media accounts, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you could please subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. I want to thank Attorney Joel for staying late today. We basically work all day long, and then we try to come out one time a week to answer these questions for you all. And these lives are for you. And I just want to reiterate, if you have any questions, if بتحبوا سؤال بالعربي, or si tiene preguntas en español, or you have any questions for us in Portuguese, let us know, and we will address them for you at the next live. At my firm, your future is our priority, and I just want to see if Joel has any final things to say before we sign off.
Yeah, and feel free, by the way, just, it's not limited just to F1s. This presentation was, but if you or anyone has questions related to other issues, whether it's family-based options, asylum claims, whether you've already been ordered, deported from the country and you want to analyze your options with an appeal maybe, or reopening your case, just always, you can always email us or give us a call. Feel free.
And just remember, if you're here on a student visa, we talked about transitioning from student visa to permanent visa, but if you came here as a tourist, we can possibly transition you to a student visa. We do that for a lot of students who come here to visit and then kind of decide they wouldn't mind staying here and studying. It's a change of status application and an extension of status on your B1, B2. And then if anybody is suffering from, COVID-19 being able to travel or to protest, please contact us. We can try to waive a consultation fee if it's called for, but we're here to help. And please give us your feedback on today's live. Give us your questions for next week's live. And I look forward to seeing you guys next Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Thank you.
Have a good day.